In this video, I'm going to be showing you the overview and layout of the Behringer X32 full size. So let's go ahead and dive in. Now, the Behringer X32 full size has 16 faders on the left fader bank, 8 faders on the right fader bank, and then 1 master fader. The compact, the producer, the other smaller versions of the X32 and the M32 might only have 8. So it's only the full-size X32 and M32 that has 16 channels here on the left. So if you happen to have one of the smaller versions of the console, some of the layout and some of the button names are going to be slightly different. For instance, they only have 8 faders on the left-hand side, but they have more buttons here on the left to go through all of the different layers on the left side of the board. But we can see that we have our channels laid out here, and then on the right side we have group 1 through 8, bus 1 through 8, bus 9 through 16, and then this thing called matrices. So that's on our right-hand side. We also have on our matrix 1 through 6 main C, we have our mono fader. So this is our mono bus master fader. And then on the very right side, we have our left-right master fader. So this is the master fader of our stereo bus. So if you are using anything on the stereo bus, which by default, all of the channels on the Behringer X32 go to the main left-right. And if you are using this and the main left-right is all the way down, you actually won't pass any audio. It doesn't matter where you have your channel fader set to. If this is down or muted, then it won't pass any sound. So the first thing that you should do when you walk up to the console is to make sure that everything is turned down and muted on the left-hand side, but make sure to take your main fader up to 0 and make sure that it is unmuted. On the left-hand side, we have all of our channels and inputs into the console. So we have channels 1 through 16 here. If we go to channels 17 through 32, this is now 17 through 32. And what I'll do is I'll move some of these faders here so we can see the difference. So here's 1 through 16, here's 17 through 32. And then if we continue moving on, we have our auxiliary ins. So our aux ins 1 through 6 are on the back of the board. They say aux in, and there's 6 TRS quarter-inch connections and 2 RCA jacks. So the 2 RCA jacks happen to share the inputs of aux 5 and aux 6. So you can actually plug in audio into both of these at the same time, and they would share these 2 channels here, aux 5 and 6. There's also a USB left-right here that's a pair, and this is the playback of the USB recorder that's up here to the left of the screen. I will go through later in this course on how to record your mix, and it's a very good idea to get in the habit of recording your mixes. Next, we have our effects returns. So this is effect 1, left and right. This is effect 2, left and right. Effect 3, left and right, and effect 4, left and right. And I will talk about effects here later in this video. The very last thing that we have is Bus Master. Now, Bus Master allows us to see all 16 channels of our buses at the same time. We can see on the right-hand side that if I went through bus 1 through 8 and I adjusted bus 1, it would be moving here at the same time. Likewise, if I went to bus 9 through 16 and I adjusted bus 9 here, it would be moving here as well. So the buses on the right-hand side and the left fader bank are identical. It just gives you the ability to see all 16 buses on the left-hand side. Next thing that I want to talk about is the channel strip that is up here on the upper left-hand side of the board. They are outlined in darker boxes, as we can see. So there's a couple sections here. There's the configuration and preamp section. There's our gate and our compressor, or the dynamics. There's our EQ section, our bus sends section, our main bus section. And then over on the right-hand side, we have monitor, talkback, scenes, a user assigned section, and mute groups. And then, of course, we have our LCD screen. But I want to talk about the channel strip real quick. So to utilize the channel strip, it's the same channel strip for all of the channels. So on an analog board, the channel strip is all one vertical strip, and then the channel 2 has the same vertical strip, and so that's why it has so many knobs on an analog console. Our digital console actually uses the same knobs, but they're digital, so they remember what channel 2 is set to, and they remember what channel 1 is set to. So for instance, if I was to select channel 1 and make an adjustment here, for instance, gain, if I was to turn this up and turn on phantom power, and I went to channel 2, we would notice that 48 volt would go off, and this gain would return over here on the left. But if we go back to channel 1, we can see that those settings are still saved. So they are identical knobs for all of the channels. And the way that we navigate through this is using the select button. And so we can see that there is a select button for all of these 16 faders on the left fader bank. There's a select button for all 8 faders on the right fader bank, and a select button for our main left-right. So let's go ahead and talk into a little bit more detail on the channel strip here. So I have channel 1 selected. My configuration and preamp section has a couple knobs. So we have our gain knob, which is our preamp, and this adjusts how loud we want our input to be when it comes into this console. So this is where if you had a microphone versus a line level, we would need to add gain for that microphone versus a line level is already at that line level that this mixer needs to mix. So we might not have to add as much gain for that. Next, we have our 48 volt phantom power and our polarity invert. So to turn on phantom power, we would simply select our channel and press 48 volt. And now our phantom power is activated on this channel. For flipping the polarity, we would simply just press the polarity reverse button. Right in the middle is a meter here that shows us what our level is on the preamp. And so if this is up too high and we are getting into the clipping, you will need to turn the preamp gain down. Also, if it's only down here in the signal and you're not getting any of these meters up here, we would need to turn it up. And in my next video, I'm going to be talking a little bit more about the preamp. Right here, we have our low cut. So this is how we turn our low cut on and off. And then this sets our frequency of the low cut. And it goes anywhere between 400 and 20 hertz. The next section that we have is our gate and our dynamics. So that gate is like an automatic mute, and I'm going to be talking about that in more detail in an upcoming video in this course. But to turn on the gate and activate it, we simply press this button, and we'll notice that this little gate light right here has turned on. If audio from this channel goes above the threshold that's set here on the gate will open or unmute, and we will see that this light will go away. This knob is how we set our threshold. You will notice that there is a view button in all of these sections. And so if we press view on the gate, our LCD screen is actually going to pull up as our gate. Now this is on channel 1 still, and we can see that channel 1 is up here in the LCD screen. But if we adjust the threshold, we will notice that this line will start moving up and down. Moving on to the dynamics, which is our compressor. We can activate our compressor and we can adjust our threshold here, which again, on the compressor, I'm going to be talking on that in an upcoming video in this course. We then have our EQ section, or our equalizer. And so we can press view on this and we can pull it up on our screen up here. Now, there are 4 bands of EQ that are available to us on the Behringer X32 and M32. There is a low mid, high mid, and high. And each of these are individually selected and controlled. So my low, I can adjust on a bunch of different parameters. My low mid, same thing. It's fully independent. So there's 4 independent bands of EQ per channel. To activate our EQ, we would simply press this button. And then we have 3 knobs here. We have gain, which is going to be turning up and turning down the EQ adjustment. We have our frequency to change the frequency up or down. And then we also have our Q, which is our bandwidth, or changing the width of how much EQ is going to be adjusted. We also have a mode button to be able to change the type of mode that these EQs are being adjusted as. One thing to note about the EQ section is on our mix buses, our matrices and our main buses. So bus 1 through 16, our matrix 1 through 6, our mono center bus, and our left-right bus all have the ability of having 6 bands of EQ per bus. So for instance, I have selected mix bus 1 here, and on the screen we can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And so this is where we see our low 2 and our high 2 come in. So if we select low, that would be our 1. If we want to select number 2, we would have to press both of these buttons at the same time. So there's our 2, or our low 2. And then if we wanted to get to 3, which is our low mid, we would just press low mid. And then same thing, high mid, high 2, high. And again, that's on all of the mix buses, matrices, and main buses of the X32. Moving back to channel 1, I then have my bus sends section. Now this is where you're going to be mixing your monitors for your band. If you have some floor wedges on stage, this is one section that you can adjust it with. If you have one of the smaller consoles, you won't have these knobs here, but you still will have a view button that you can control it with the LCD screen. So we can simply go and select 1 through 4, and this would correspond to 1, 2, 3, and 4. If we went to 5 through 8, then this would correspond to 5, 6, 7, and 8. Same thing through 9 through 12, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then 13, 14, 15, and 16. On our screen up here, if we wanted to adjust our 5 through 8, we would simply rotate our first rotary knob, and then we can get over to this 5 through 8, and then we can start adjusting things up and down. Last thing on our channel strip is our main bus. Now this gives us the ability to turn our channel on or off. So this is on and this is off. It gives us the ability of panning something left or right, or leaving it right in the center. If you're using your mono bus, you can turn on this channel for your mono bus and control the volume going to this mono bus as well. If you are on an LCR type setup, we can go to setup, we can then go over to config and change our panning mode to be LCR. Once we do that, then we can go back to our main section and see that it is a center. So now if I turn this up, we can actually pan differently than if this was set to a main plus mono. Let's go back and change it to left, right plus sub or left, right plus mono. We'll go back here and we'll see as I change the panning, our sub or our main center will not actually change. So that brings me to the conclusion of the channel strip for this channel. The next thing that we have over on the right-hand side is our monitor section. And so this allows us to have a few options as far as how we want to monitor something. Now, monitor goes along with a solo. Now, a solo lets me solo up and isolate just this channel by pressing solo. And so I can grab some headphones and control the volume of those headphones right here, or I can have some near-field monitors plugged into the control room output on the back of the X32 and use this knob right here to control the volume of those. Don't accidentally plug your main left-right speakers of the PA into the control room outputs, as if you accidentally solo something mid-show, it would completely wreck your mix in the room and be very distracting. So make sure that you only use the control room outputs on the board if you are using near-field monitors at your mix position for your monitoring. There's a bunch of options in here that I have some more information on my YouTube channel for those things. We also have our TalkBack, which has a built-in microphone right here, or if we plug in an external mic into this spot right here, we can go and select external mic. Now the TalkBack is useful for me to be able to talk back to the band. Say we had floor monitors on buses 1, 2, 3, and 4, I can simply take my TalkBack A and I can select 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then if I want to talk, and I don't have my external mic right now, so I'm just going to be using this one, I can turn up my talkback level, and I can press and hold talk A. And as we can see, as I'm talking here, it is going through to the mix buses 1, 2, 3, and 4. As we can see that those levels are right here. If I was wanting to turn myself up, we can simply turn up the talkback level with this knob. If we want to have less of my voice, we can turn it down. Another very helpful thing is latching. Now, latching means that if I press talk A, it is latched, it is turned on, versus if it is not latching, it is a momentary, meaning that if I press and hold it, it will talk, but if I let go, it'll mute it. The next thing that we have here is our oscillator, and this is going to be able to be a spot that you can generate pink noise or a tone of frequency out of your board. So you can check if your PA is working. You can check your floor monitors to see if that's working. We can simply select one of our buses. Say if I was wanting to go check monitor 4, I could go and select bus 4, and I can generate some tone. And then I can actually turn this up louder by using this level knob. And as we can see, it's now tone generating up to -18. The very last thing that we have is our lamp, and this is just going to be the brightness of the lamp that's plugged into your lamp connection on the X32. Moving on to the right side of the board here, we have our scenes section. So you can press view on this, and it will either come up in the cues, scenes, or snippets page. If you want to change which page it comes up on when you press view, go to setup, go to config, and then under show view, you can change which one it comes up as. If you wanted to have it come up as cues or snippets, you would simply select one of those other things. I choose to have this on scenes. Now, the scenes section is where we can save the parameters and all of the settings of all of our channels and outputs to a file. And that file can then be backed up to a USB thumb drive, which is something that I suggest. And so to save a scene, we simply go and rotate to an empty spot, and we are going to save this on 8, and we can press save, and then we can title this. So I'm just going to title this A, and I'm going to press save. And we can now see that that is saved under A there. To then export that to a USB drive, we can plug in a USB drive into the USB recorder. We can press utility, and we can export this scene by selecting it and then exporting it. Our user assign section allows us to have all of these different parameters right at our fingertips. For instance, by default, this is set to a tap tempo of our effects. So our effects 3, if we go and press our effects button here, our effects 3 is a stereo delay. And so this tap button actually sets the speed of those delays. So echo, echo, echo. And so you can change the timing of that by either tapping slower to the beat or faster to the beat. All of these parameters in the user assign section can be edited and set up to how you want it. And I actually have a great blog post at drewbrashler.com on the user assign section if you want to have more reading up on that. The next thing that we have is our mute groups, which are right here. There are 6 mute groups. And what a mute group allows us to do is assign multiple channels to one mute group or many mute groups. And then when we press this mute group, it will mute all the channels that are associated to that group. To program these, we can simply press mute group button, and then we can go and press and then select the channels that we want to have associated with this mute group. So for instance, I'm going to select 1 through 4, 6 through 8. Once I turn off this mute group button up here at the LCD screen, and I press the mute group, those channels that are associated with this mute group are going to be muted. One thing to note about mute groups is you are able to control everything on the left-hand side of the board with a mute group. So you can mute channels, you can mute the aux-ins and effects, and any of the mix buses. You are not able to control any of the matrices or main buses with a mute group. Only the left side of the board can be controlled via a mute group. So to unassign these channels from this mute group, I would simply press mute group up here, press and hold mute group 1, and simply press these select buttons so that they are all off. Once I release and I press mute group again, This mute group is no longer controlling these channels. The very last thing that I want to talk about is our LCD screen and our main control section here. So we have a home button, which a home button is going to be very useful to hit. Anytime you press select on a channel, you should be pressing home, as that is just going to give you a very nice overview of the channel, from the input, the gate, EQ, dynamics, inserts if you're going to be using those, outputs, anything that you want to adjust are at your fingertips here when you press home. Now, meters pulls up a metering page. So if you see an old analog console, they have this big thing behind the console that's called a meter bridge. And it has all of the meters for inputs or outputs or any of the buses that are on that board. And we can see the same thing by clicking meters. So here is all of our channels, 1 through 32. We can see gain reduction from the gates and gain reduction from the compressors. If we page over by using our page select right and left, we can go to our mix buses and see what volumes those are set to. Also, if we happen to mute something, it will go ahead and put those as red on the little faders. We can see our matrix and our main bus, as well as our dynamics gain reduction for each of those. So we have our aux and effects, which is going to be our aux outputs, our aux inputs, and our effects returns. If we go to in and out, this gives you a great view of everything from the inputs to all of the outputs, including the Ultranet P16 outputs on the X32. Next, we have an RTA, which is going to be super helpful if you're mixing, and you maybe have a piece of feedback. The RTA will then display that as either a line, if you are doing a bar type, or if you have a spectrograph, it'll show up as a brighter color. And so we can set this to be either on the selected channel, or we can have this listening to the monitor section that we have on the right-hand side of the board. So if you have this on monitor and you go and select a channel, this RTA will show the selected channel. One additional thing to mention about the RTA is it is per channel on this here. So we can see that there is an RTA on every single EQ of all of the channels. I just don't have a microphone plugged in to show you that right now. The next button that we have here is our routing. And so our routing is going to be all of the routing inside of the X32 on inputs and outputs for everything on this console. And I will have another video later in this course specifically on routing. Next button that we have is our setup, and we can see that there's multiple pages here. We have global, config, remote, network settings, name and icons, preamps, and the card. Now the card controls the external card that we have on the back of the board for the expansion card slot. I currently have the X Live card, and there's multiple different types of cards for your X32. Preamps allows us to control the preamps over all of the local and AES inputs on this board. We also have name and icon. So if you were wanting to name and give an icon to any of your channels, for instance, channel 1, we can do that here. So we can rotate and change the color of this strip to maybe green. We can also invert this strip to make it brighter. And then we can also select an icon. And we can also give it a name by using one of these things here. So for instance, if this was the snare, I would go ahead and click snare. And then if we wanted to edit it even farther, we can go ahead and press edit and use this typing interface by using these knobs here to type in our name. We then have network settings, which is going to be for networking your console to use an iPad to control it with. We also have remote, which allows us to have some MIDI interface connections, as well as some remote section protocols for using this board to control a DAW, like Ableton or Pro Tools. Config gives us our configuration settings, and global gives us some global settings of the console. Moving down farther, we have our library. So this is where we have channel and effects library, and I actually sell two different things for the channels for some presets that you can load onto your X32 and just pull up my channel preset for instance, a kick drum or a bass guitar. And then we also have effects library, which gives us 100 different effects sections that you can load up effects or save your effects. And I also have a download available for my effects presets, where I have saved my favorite presets over 1 through 100, and those are all here. We also have routing presets and our AES 50 presets. If we go one more section down, we have our effects section. Now, our effects section allows us to use time-based effects like reverbs or choruses or delays. And then we also have our insert-only effects on the right-hand side. For instance, a de-esser or a compressor or a graphic EQ. All of those are available to us here. And I have a huge tutorial section on YouTube specifically about using these effects with the Behringer X32. The very last two buttons that we have is Mute Group, which we already talked about, and then the Utility button, which allows us to pull up hidden menus in all of these screens. So for instance, my effects section, if I press in Utility, I can then go and pull up any effects presets that I have and load them on any of my effects sections that I want to. Another example for this is if I was in my Scenes section and I press Utility, there would be a Utility hidden menu that would pop up here as well. On the back of the console, we have all of our inputs right here. So there's 1 through 32 on the inputs here. We also have our aux ins back here, as well as our aux outs. And again, there are 6 TRS and 2 RCA. Now, the RCA does share with 5 and 6, and it does output both on the TRS and the RCA. So you can use all of those connections as you want to. On the input side, it also shares those inputs on the one channel, or the 2 channels, aux 5 and 6. And so those would be coming in at the same gain level. So you would have to adjust the gain external from the board if you wanted to have both of those inputs live at the same time. We then have our outputs, which are on this side of the board. So there's 16 XLR outputs available to us. We also have a couple other connections like the AES 50 or AES EBU, and I'll be talking about the AES 50 routing in another video. And then on the far right, my right, your left side, we have our control room outputs. And again, please do not make the mistake of plugging your main PA into these outputs, as these are control room outputs made for monitoring, not for sending your main PA out.